Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Rizzcast podcast. My name is Justin Rizzo. Thanks so much for listening to this or watching it on YouTube, wherever you're at. We appreciate you tuning in. Excited to have my good friend Matt Gilman back for another episode today. And loved having him on the show a couple weeks ago, but today I wanted to talk with him about a topic that everyone is familiar with, no matter who you are listening to this, whether you're in ministry or in business or I'm trying to stop making that differentiation between ministry and business because I've found and I know so many business people that probably have like greater ministries than a lot of people who are like in quote unquote ministry. So I got to find better terminology there. But whoever you are listening to this, you can relate to the topic that Matt and I are going to talk about today. And it is called pain. And, Matt and I have been good friends for over 20 years, and we have had just countless hours of discussions over this topic, over different things that have happened in our lives for the past 20 years. And something that I really have found is that pain in my life, and Matt, I know you can say the same thing, pain in your life is not just pain for the sake of pain, but the Lord uses pain. Maybe doesn't cause all pain, but he'll use pain to shape us and to mold us into who he is. And there's so many different avenues we can go down, so many things we can talk about in your life and my life in the world. I mean, our world is filled with pain. I mean, you like go on X or on Instagram and look at some news outlets or whatever, you're just like, there's pain everywhere. Pain sells in one sense of the word, right? Like the worse we can make the situation or scenario, whether here in the States or overseas or in this family drama or whatever, it's like the worse we can make it, the more we'll get clicks and likes or whatever. And and also I'll say this, like just as human beings, we are infatuated with story because God, I believe, is the great storyteller, and He didn't just create us to be robots. And so, we all want to be the hero of our own story, right? And if you look at the timeline of your life, and I've spent a lot of time listening to and reading books from Donald Miller, and he talks a lot about this idea of story and how you are living in a story and you have 60, 70, 80 years of your story, and then your kids or your friends or your family or whatever will come behind you, and it just kind of keeps going and keeps going, keep going. So in this time in history that you're living in, um, what are you doing to make the best of your story? And I want to just open with a story that Donald Miller tells of a friend of his whose daughter was just struggling and living with her boyfriend, and there was abuse happening, all kinds of things. And his mom and dad, they raised her right, and they're just like so broken that she's over here, doing these things, and she's being abused, whatever. And this guy reached out to Donald, a friend of his, and it's like, Donald, like, what do I do? My daughter's just over here doing crazy stuff, and we're just trying to talk sense into her. And Donald said this statement that is so compelling. And if you know Donald Miller, if you don't know Donald Miller, he's a phenomenal author, phenomenal speaker. You should listen to his books. But he said this statement. He said, "Well, it sounds like your daughter needs a better story." And the dad's like, "What?" And Donald began just kind of coaching him as a parent that they did a great job of rules, values. This is how we act. This is not how we act. This is what we do. We are this family. We do this. We do this. We do this. And there was no story given to this girl, and so she finds a guy who's interested in her, even though it's perverse and there's abuse happening. At least it's something interesting than just don't do this, do this, don't do this, don't do this. The dad was compelled. I'm going to fast forward the story here just for the sake of time. He goes home, drains her savings account, buys, I think it was in Africa, like a plot of land or something, gets all these things together. I believe it was to build an orphanage, and like, we're gonna give my daughter an amazing story to be a part of, and just whatever. The wife wasn't thrilled when she found out he trained the savings account. And then they went to their daughter a couple months later and said, "Hey, this is what mom and dad are doing. We want you to come, in a couple months for the dedication of this orphanage or whatever it is, this humanitarian project that they were going to be doing." It was like, "No, don't want any part of it, whatever." But the more she saw what they were doing, she saw the construction happening, she saw the hearts and the lives that were going to be touched and changed. She eventually left this guy, left the bad story, because her parents gave her a different narrative and a different story to be a part of, right? So all of us in our life were raised in a certain home with certain visions, certain values, certain restrictions or freedoms, whatever it is, and that has shaped who you are today. So you might be sitting there complaining, hating on your life today. You might be mildly content, or you might be like, dude, I'm like loving my life. Wherever you're at, you are a part of a story that has been shaped and formed since the time that you were in your mother's womb, and it's still going today. And so when we talk about this topic of pain, I don't want to just come at it from like this, like, yeah, man, pain sucks. And it's like, oh man, like life is so hard. Oh man, like, but at least we have Jesus. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, um, we have to have perspective in our life to move forward. And I think, a lot of the things that are necessary for us to do that. The biggest thing I'd say, and I just had a conversation with someone recently, is not keeping everything in between your earlobes. I was talking to a friend and it was just so clear. It was like all in here. And I asked some like leading questions of like, do you have like a pastor? Do you have like a counselor? Do you have like a professional therapist? Like anyone? And there was like no one. And it was just like, I just got to like keep things going. I got to da 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 da. And I could just see, and just the brokenness was like emanating, right? So, one of the biggest things I think is perspective, which I said. Second biggest thing is, how do you get perspective? You have to talk to other people. And so, Matt, I know you've had a lot in your life, and we'll dive into a couple different topics here. Again, there's so many areas we can go, but just kind of 30,000 of view, pain has shaped who Matt Gilman is today. What kind of like just comes to you when you hear that statement?
Yeah. One, God is near to the brokenhearted. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that I have experienced the presence of God on a way deeper level in my life in seasons of pain than when things are going well. I it almost not it doesn't actually, but almost makes me wish for those seasons back again, because in the intensity of the emotion of everything, like for example, if we're just going to be vulnerable, I went through a nasty divorce in 2016, 2017, and it was one of those things where I was just like, this was not supposed to be my story. I grew up in a Lutheran denomination. My dad's a Lutheran pastor. I think I said that last time I was on. Uh, but like, if for any reason a pastor in that denomination gets a divorce, they are excommunicated from the denomination. And so,
Mhm,
like, I'm so thankful that my grandparents, my parents, they have a legacy of healthy marriage. Um, but that also gave me this element of shame. Like, generations before me
mm,
had healthy marriages, and then all of a sudden I'm going through something that not only is a disgrace to my family's legacy, but from how I grew up, I should be excommunicated from ministry. Like, I just remember walking through that 2 3 year season of my life was the most, I the most horrendous and painful thing that I think I've ever gone through. And I was mad at God. I was mad at my ex-wife. I was mad at, my job. And in the midst of it all, my job is to lead worship. And I'm forced to go and lead people to a God that I'm angry at.
mm,
And just
wow.
like, but here's the thing, and maybe I'm just saying this because I'm a worship leader and worship is such a center point of my life. Worshiping God in the midst of my pain, even though it was the last thing I wanted to do, it was the number one thing in my life that kept me aligned with truth. I had every excuse in the book to leave my faith, to
Mm,
leave the ministry, and to go do whatever the heck I wanted to do. I could have, and I wanted to, and I probably should. Like, I felt like I had the right to, because of what I went through and what all of the turmoil and the torment that I was going through every single day. I had a right, in my mind, to go do this. But I would go lead worship, in Orlando at the House of Prayer in Orlando. I was on staff at the House of Prayer in Orlando. I'd go lead worship, um, which was run by my ex-wife's parents, so I'm going to work
mm,
for my in-laws,
mm,
it was just a bizarre, which I love, still love them. Great relationship there. So Carlos and Emily, if you're watching this, love you guys. But anyway, it was just a crazy. The last thing I wanted to do was walk into a prayer room and lead worship for 2 hours, but it kept my heart aligned with the truth of who God is and who He says I am in the midst of my pain. And
Mm,
every single time I would walk in angry, I would leave with peace in my heart, going, I didn't want to go there, but you met me there anyway. I'm mad at you, and you met with me anyway. And I always think of this phrase is thrown around a lot in Christian circles, but the Bill Johnson phrase, like this, we only have this side of eternity to worship God through pain. Because once we're there, every tear is wiped away. There's no more death, sorrow, crying, or pain. We don't have the opportunity to worship Him when our emotions tell us we don't want to. We don't
mm,
have the opportunity to worship in eternity the way we would in this human experience that we have in this 80, 90, 100 years that we have on earth. And so that always has stuck with me. But absolutely, I know the kindness of God, the mercy of God, the grace of God in a deeper way now. And I'm not, yeah, I would say my knowledge of those things before those seasons of pain, I still had the knowledge of it, but it was very superficial knowledge. When you're cut so deep and God has to go into the deepest places of your heart to mend you, there's an intimacy there with God that's created, whether you like it or not,
yep,
because He's the only one who can heal your wounds. He's the only
yep.
one who can actually who has access to go to those deep places and fix you. And so, anyways, that's
I love that. So 10 years, 24/7 worship on
yeah,
staff, full time at the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. 10 years on staff, right? That you spent there?
yep,
Okay.
yep.
So 10 years, 24/7 worship and prayer. Um, what did it cost you and what did it give you?
Um, I'll start with what it gave me because I think what it cost me is something I think you and I are probably still working out right now.
Yep, for sure.
Um, what it gave me was resilience in the place of prayer. I mean, I think I shared in the last time I was on with you, first 3 months of our internship, I literally sat in that prayer room, bored out of my mind, confronted with my barrenness in the place of prayer. I had nothing to talk to God about. I had hardly any biblical knowledge. I was biblically illiterate. I loved music, loved worship, but I didn't know really much about the Bible. I didn't know hardly anything about prayer. I didn't know how to talk to God. Being forced to sit 24 to 30 hours a week in a prayer room forced me to get something to say to God, forced me to go, I can't just sit here bored for the rest of my life. I need something to talk to Him about. And so it taught me resilience in the place of prayer. It also taught me, just the significance of, I love the concept of prayer and worship together. They call it the harp and bowl model at the house of prayer, but whatever you want to call it, wherever you are, like you can listen to a message or someone praying or whatever. And if one thing strikes you in the moment, you might remember little aspects of it 2, 3 years down the road. But if you take that same message, put a melody to it, you'll sing that song for the rest of your life. You'll sing that scripture for the rest of your life. I still remember, dude, just I was singing the other day from one of your sets when I was on your team a long time ago. This momentary light affliction is
Yep, yep,
working in me an eternal weight of glory. I like 2 Corinthians 4, is that what it was?
yep, yep, yep,
Yeah, like, those sets are ingrained in my heart because we sang it for a year, I think. We sang
yep.
2 Corinthians 4 for a year, and, perfect example of what to say or what to talk about right now, like, momentary light affliction is, like, it's a real thing, and it's part of the human experience. Jesus said He didn't say, "In the world you might have trouble." He didn't say, "In the world try to escape the trouble." He said, "In the world you will have trouble."
Yep,
Trouble is part of the human experience, and it's how we
yep,
navigate it with Him hand in hand. It kind of determines the outcome. So you have every, tendency and temptation to become bitter in the midst of our pain. Like I felt all of that,
yep,
and I'm thankful that in the midst of it, part of it. It was my job, and I was forced to. But part of me, I just knew that it was right to go to God even when I was mad at him, didn't wanna sing to him, didn't wanna talk to him, but he was the only place that I knew how to go to. And
Yep.
so, yeah.
Yep. So take me to October 2023. Um, I'm overseas on a worship nights trip and had heard the news about what had happened with Mike Bickle and IHOP. And, I didn't believe the news when I first heard. Again, I was overseas. I was like, no, like something's strange here. This can't be right. And then, I made a phone call to some people that I knew to be trustworthy people, and I kind of like asked a couple of questions in my roundabout way to like, okay, if they're really being truthful, I will know. If they're lying, they're going to answer a certain, like I had it in my brain. I was like, and then every single question, I had about three questions. My wife and I on the phone with these people, and every question they answered 100%. I was like, shoot, this is true. And being one of my best friends, we're on the phone, and so I'm grieving. I'm in shock. I'm not even grieving at that point. Let's be real. I'm in shock in London. Shocked in London. There's a movie there, and not believing what I'm hearing. I call you to say, hey, bro, like brace yourself. Like our world is in a big part of our world, right? 10 years for you, 15 years for me on staff at this church, parachurch organization, whatever you want to call it, house of prayer. And a bit of my backstory, I had left 6 years before um all this stuff happened. So my wife and I left staff 6.5 years ago now. And but still very much just it was our place for 15 years, right? We're on staff there. What what kinda goes through your brain when we're on this call together, like, same type of thing, shock?
Yeah, I'm flashing back right now, it's just even as you're telling it, like, I'm flashing back to that moment. I know exactly where I was, and it was so unbelievable because we can say his name, right? Or, like,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mike Bickle. The Mike Bickle that you were telling me about in that conversation and the Mike Bickle that I knew personally were 2 completely different people.
Mhm,
And so I just remember going, "There's no way. There's just there's just no way." In fact, with all of we've had a lot of exposure in the last several years of high profile ministry people who, have been exposed with moral failures and all of that. And I would always say to people, thank God for Mike Bickle.
mhm,
Thank God for Mike, because I know he's the one guy that I know
mhm,
would never do XYZ. Thank God for righteous man Mike, like, and so it was, and maybe we had all, not maybe, we definitely all probably placed him on too high a pedestal.
yep,
Um, um, but it was just the contradiction of truth, of the actual truth mixed with my reality. Um, and so I remember just being in denial for a long time until you and I probably talked to several of the same people and asked them probably several of the same questions. Uh, and I'm just going, there are too many people that I love and trust. There are who are all saying the same thing. And there's no way that you can get this guy, 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 all from different parts of the country, all to tell me the same story and to cohesively lie to me about this. Like, there's just no way. And so, I think it took a while for truth to settle in, but I think the long term the long term effects of this isn't so much, man, Mike Bickle's a bad guy. The long term effects of this, for me anyway, are my whole adult life for 10 years, 18 to 28 years old, I was indoctrinated with this man's teaching. And so I honestly went to a really dark place for probably a few months, just going, what do I believe even? What? what did I learn there that I can actually take to the bank as truth,
Mhm.
and what do I need to throw into the furnace? Because I don't know anymore. I'm confused. My whole doctrine, the doctrine of my life, is rooted in this man's teachings and stories. And so I think in a lot of ways it forced me to panic and just have this spiritual identity crisis. Like, do I really believe that Jesus is coming back in 5 to 50 years? Do I really believe, do I really, all of, there's the core teachings of the house of prayer.
Mhm.
And then, which that one particular eschatology stuff is real trippy. If
Yeah. Yeah.
you start planning your whole life for Jesus to come back in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
and what if he's not?
Yeah.
Like,
So destructive.
just what if he's not? And you have, what if I'm going to live on the earth for another 50? I just turned 40. What if I'm going to live on the earth for another 50, 60 years and Jesus doesn't come back in my lifetime? Where was the disconnect there? And so
Mhm.
that one's a real trippy one to kind of un detangle. Your word is detangle. I love
Yeah.
detangle. Um, and so just going back through old teachings and going, forcing myself to go, is this actually in the Bible? And this has been, as painful as that process was, it was really a gift to me to have to force myself to take those notes and take out my Bible again and go, if I see it in the Word, it's real. If
Mhm.
I see it in my Bible with my own eyes, not just because Mike Bickle told me to, or not just because Mike Bickle guilted me into something, or manipulated a group of people into believing something. If it's in my Bible, it is truth. And there is a lot that I learned at IHOP from Mike that is real truth. And
Mhm.
you know, that's, a lot of people are kind of all or nothing types of people, and might tend to say any teaching that you ever learned from the house of prayer needs to get thrown into the furnace. I'm not on that page.
Mhm.
I, and I think I said last time too, but just, I know that God led me there.
Mhm.
And, this has been going on for 40 plus years. Why would God lead me to a place run by this man who had secret sin for 4 decades or
Mhm.
more? And it was never about Mike. It was never about, it was never about
Yeah.
following Mike Bickle.
Mhm.
This was about cultivating a life in the Word, cultivating a life in worship and prayer. And this is one I tried to process all of this at home. I'm thankful. Like, I always say, God led me there when He did in 2004, and God also led me out when He did 10 years later. And I'm thankful that, you've lived in Kansas City even through all of the drama coming out. I can't imagine being there on site as all of this has unfolded. I'm thankful for the decade of separation. Um, but I tried to process this with my pastor here in Orlando, and what he told me really helped me. I said, "Why? How do I get that God is merciful? I get that God would allow somebody as many times as possible to come to a place of repentance." But I said, 40 years is a real long time to
Mhm.
have willful, unrepentant sin, predatory behavior. I said, that's a long time. And he said, he immediately, was like the Lord just spoke to him in the moment. He said, I am immediately reminded of the parable of the wheat and the tares. It was, the farmer plants the grain, the enemy comes and sows the weeds, and the servants go to the farmer. They say, the weeds are growing with the grain. Should we pluck up the weeds so that the grain can grow freely? And the farmer said, don't pluck up the weeds, because the weeds, if you pluck up the weeds, you're going to pull up the grain as well, but it's going to be premature. And he said, once the grain is at full maturity, pluck all of them together and then we'll separate them. And
Mhm.
he said to me, he goes, look at all of the good that has come out. That if God would have plucked up the weed too soon, none of that, like, I mean, you and I are prime examples. Like, I wouldn't have any sort of a ministry or platform. Not that it's all about platform, but I wouldn't have the opportunity that I have now if it weren't for that. You probably wouldn't
Mhm.
have had a launching pad that you had. I think
Yeah.
of Corey Russell and Alan Hood and all of these guys who have been launched out from that furnace of the prayer room, because they sat for decades just ministering to the Lord through His Word. And had the weed been plucked prematurely, we wouldn't have had that opportunity. And so
Yeah.
part of me is like, man, that's so good. And the other part of me is like, but God, surely there was another way. Like,
Right, right, right.
surely there's another way that I could have been launched into ministry if it meant that other girls and women weren't victimized. And so
Yep.
I still struggle with that a little bit. And I think I will probably always have that question in my mind going, how do I reconcile? I can't reconcile, well, this was for my ministry opportunity that this all happened behind the scenes. And like,
Yeah, yeah,
it
totally.
so there's I'm thankful for the gift of that. Like, yes, the Lord had a much bigger picture, a broader scope in his mind as he was looking at all of this. And but at the end of the day, I'm just like, man, I pray for Mike's soul. I pray for, like, I want Mike to love Jesus sincerely, not just the version of Jesus that he's created in his mind. And, you know, and it's also just kind of forced me to look at the way that I minister too. I don't want to base any theology off of a personal prophetic experience. My theology is based on the
Yep,
Word of God and the Word of God alone. Anything
yep.
else that I experience with God, I can maybe share those things, but not on the same plane as Scripture. Like, my personal prophetic experiences may be real to me, but maybe they're not so real to somebody else. And they have every right to question that. But what will stand the test of time is if I teach from this book. And so, yeah.
How old was your pastor? Is your pastor? How old is he?
He's probably close, if he's listening, he's probably close to 50, upper
Okay.
40.
Okay. So has some wisdom in his years in his life.
He's been through it too.
Yeah.
He's got his own stories and his own history with the Lord, and there's certainly pain involved in that too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I wouldn't go ask a 20-year-old. No, not that 20-year-old
Yeah.
pastors
No,
don't have.
totally.
Just going. I need someone with real life experience to help
Yeah.
me navigate all this. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, you said the phrase, the biggest thing that I have realized from all of this, well, many things, but one of the biggest things is, detangling of a season or a person or a, scenario, whatever it is that, and I pretty much come to this conclusion that, again, you may listen to this podcast and have like even no idea what we're talking about, and that's okay. Don't go research it. You're better off. But in your life, as I said at the top of the show, like pain is something we can all mutually feel and understand, no matter where in the world you're listening to from. And the one thing that's really spawned in my wife and my heart from this thing is, you know what? We just need to like be committed to detangling situations and scenarios and beliefs really on the regular. Like not just waiting for some like big thing to happen. And my wife and I, like we've done a lot of counseling, a lot of therapy really since like 2010, and very very grateful for that. Now that 15 16 years later, we see things that were said in sessions back in like 2011, 12, 13, like we're reflecting on like, oh my goodness, like this is like a nugget, and this is this, and this is this, and it's really helped to keep us our hearts pure in the midst of all of this. Because and again, you might have no idea or you have not experienced something like that happened, what we're talking about, but have you detangled the way your child doesn't talk to you, the way your child turned out, the way that your life turned out. You thought you'd be here, you thought you'd be doing this, whatever. Like I'm just giving scenarios. Like if we take things to the bank without being rooted in a biblical worldview and without, like I said earlier, like talking to someone else about it and just making all the decisions between our earlobes, and we take that to the bank, we're like, this is this, and bam, it's like we have to be careful of letting that cement dry, because at the end of the day, our heart is the most important thing in all of this. And obviously, like we've all experienced death. Like death is one of the most intense things you can have happen, right? 'Cause it's like someone is gone. It's not just that they hurt you, they're gone, right? And you won't see them till, hopefully the next stage, right? Um, but even like processing that, like if you don't process that, embrace the stages of grief and not just say, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. I'm going to stuff it," or just like live in a perpetual place of anger, or whatever the different stages of grief are. Like we have to embrace the stages of grief to come out of the stages of grief, and it can take I'm not an expert on this, but it can take months, years, sometimes, several years, depending on what the situation is. And that's been kind of our commitment, my wife and I's commitment to, um, you know, seek to be victim centric first, and people who went through all these horrific things at ground zero. We know like several of these people personally, and then to steward our hearts to say, we're going to detangle this to the best of our ability. We're going to get friends and therapists and counselors involved to do that, and then build a better future, that this won't happen again, that there's boundaries in place, not only in our own ministry, but we look at, with different glasses now at different things that are happening. And it's not like you need something like this to happen that Matt and I went through. Like, just look at Christian news. And you don't have to look far to see, like, just there's so much um just horrific things happening. And so if you don't have a way to keep perspective kept on Jesus and a way to detangle, I just don't know how you're gonna make it through life, really, you know what I'm saying?
You have to. You have to. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I was getting when all of the IHOP scandal broke 2 years ago was, there will be a narrative out that says if you talk about it, you're slandering.
Mm,
And that was a lot of what was being said
yep,
from the platform. Don't talk about it. Don't put anything
yep,
on social media because you don't want to engage in gossip and slander. It's sinful. No,
yep,
no, no. You, this was this this was a scandal that affected not just the people who were on staff at IHOP. This affected a prayer movement reaching to the ends of the earth. We have every right, and it's not even just a right; it's a necessity that
mhm.
we process with one another and heal together. And
You
go ahead.
I'm not sure who it was in your world, but dude, I remember when you told me that. I think I was still in Europe on this trip. I'm not sure if it was the same pastor or a different pastor, said to you, Matt, if you keep it all inside, you'll come to wrong conclusions. He said, when you process it, you'll rightfully divide between soul and spirit. This was good. We're taking it to the bank. This was horrible. We're crucifying that and getting it out. I believe that was you who told me that from your pastor, right?
That wasn't my past. That was I was in Brazil at the time with Tail High,
Okay.
and he's the one who told me. I was uh, just kind of. It was. I think you had called me, and I was just about to leave for Brazil the next day, and so I was down there with him as everything broke, and he was the one. He's like, "You have to talk about this. Like,
Yes.
this isn't something. This isn't something that you just wait and see how it unfolds. You were, you and I specifically were big pieces of the puzzle there, especially in those early days,
Mhm.
and it massively affects us. And we have not just a right again; it's a necessity that we process this out loud with
Yep.
people who were underneath us. Like I did my best to try to call as many or try to communicate at least with as many people who I ever knew were on the teams going, I'm so sorry
Mm,
if I ever perpetuated falsehood, if I ever perpetuated a narrative that was not godly, or if I
mm,
ever, like in the name of being loyal to our leader, agreed with certain extra biblical things that aren't actually true. And so, like, I, we were leaders. We have to be accountable for what we did, and and for what we bought into. And you said maybe this could take weeks or months. We're 2 years later, bro, and I'm still feeling the effects of what do I actually believe on the second coming of Jesus? What do I like? It's just it's such a massive, all-encompassing thing because my whole world was this little bubble in Kansas City
mhm.
for 10 years. And so, yeah, I think it's so important that we process out loud, um, because I think when we come to our own preconceived notions at the end of this is one thing that my wife and I have started to say, this can be this can be applied in marriage, it can be applied in ministry, but bitterness grows in silence.
Mm,
Bitterness grows in silence, and it's
yeah,
it's something that is, if you don't talk out loud with people, you are forced to believe what your brain or your own logic would tell you about that particular situation. If you have no one else's outside perspective,
yeah.
you're forced to just believe what your heart tells you. And Bible says your heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. Bitterness
Yeah.
grows in silence. If you're not talking about it and if you have anger in your heart, your anger will quickly turn into bitterness.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And just to reiterate that, and we'll bring this to a close here. But that how pain shapes us as human beings, thinking about this season, this 15 years of our life and what it gave, what it took, all the things you can, and it's right, as we already stated, to talk that through. I highly recommend people. I mean, I've told so many of my friends, and I have friends in every gamut of the spectrum from in this piece of history that we're all still living in. But no matter where you are, getting outside counsel is so important,
yeah,
and getting other people to bounce ideas off of. It can even determine your faith
yes,
remaining in Christ or not, because like you said, bitterness, man, it's if it takes root inside of you, there's no telling the destruction. I mean, there's all kinds of like scientific and medical studies of how your thought process affects your body.
that's right.
Like dying dead cells, cancerous cells, whatever in your body can be affected by the way you think. And so it's important to have, like, again, I'm not saying live in a fairy tale. I'm saying face it and go on the journey to deal with it. And what grieves me is there's a lot of people, a lot of my friends even, who have refused to do that. And there's every excuse under the sun that they can give, but at the end of the day, I'm just a firm believer on there is no excuse big enough to not detangle life, period, let alone when something like this happens in your life. And so, if you're listening to this, and no matter where you're at on the gamut of the journey of the whole thing, or maybe you know nothing about it, that's okay. But you have pain. Again, that's the great unifier in this, that Donald Miller even talks about, is like, we all have a story. And let's be clear, guys, like, a movie where the lead character gets everything he wants when he wants it and just succeeds the whole movie is a horrible movie. You turn that movie off.
Yeah,
What you want to see, and what, even if you don't know it, what you want to see in your own life is that you're the overcomer, that the guide, the Yoda person who comes along, Obi-Wan Kenobi who comes along to help Luke along the journey, to make him, the hero of the story. We have to see a change happen in the lead character. You want to see him almost die, almost give up. I read a book on storytelling one time that talks about what audiences want to see or read in a book, in a story, is your lead character starts on a horse and they're just trolloping along and they're galloping, whatever. They get kicked off by the evil person. The evil person comes over, bashes them in the head repeatedly until they're a bloody pulp and they're about to die. The audience is like, yes, more killing, more, whatever. And then you see that. Now, a horrible movie is when that they just like die. That sucks. I hate those types of movies. Some people love them, but you want to see, and that person is going to rise. They're going to get back on the horse. They're going to heal, and they're going to defeat the enemy. But you have to be willing to go on that journey. You have to be willing to find a guide in your life to take you through your sorrow, to take you through your pain. I know people who are resisting their pain. Like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just focused on what I'm fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. I'm like, you're epically deceived. Yes, it was. And I know people who are so steeped in the processing of the pain. It's like, hey, just remember, you do have another like, the story's still going. Like, don't get stuck in this chapter, because God's writing an epic novel, and you can't just stay in the dismal, abysmal chapter, beating your head against a wall. Like, again, we want to get the hero to rise and to continue the journey. And so anyway, that's kind of where I'm at on it. Final thoughts.
yeah. One practical and one spiritual. But practically, I just even as you're talking, I just feel people might have the excuse of, well, therapy's too expensive. It's a real it's again, it's your spiritual well-being, your mental well-being. And I know there's a lot of talk about mental health these days that there wasn't maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yep. Yep.
There is a real value to your mental and spiritual well-being. And whether or not you are able to meet with a therapist once a week or once a quarter, start investing in that, because
Yeah.
And maybe that requires a little bit of rebudgeting and taking a look at your household budget and going, where am I putting things that maybe are less valuable that I could be putting towards this? Um, because and again, like you said, it doesn't just have to be about crisis. Life in general is crazy for all of us. We have a lot that we're dealing with and a lot that we're going through all the time, even outside of the realm of crisis. And
Yep.
so therapy, whether maybe it's just you have a standing meeting with your pastor once a month, or whatever, someone who has life experience that's ahead of you
Yep.
that can actually sow into and speak into your circumstance, that is invaluable. Someone that
Yep.
you trust, someone who knows that they're gonna have your back and they love you,
Yep.
um, is so crucial, so important. Another just you had mentioned people avoiding their pain, or resisting their pain. I'm reminded, as you said that, David wrote Psalm 22. He opens up, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
Mm.
And I didn't know that David had written that until a buddy of mine said, actually, Jesus quoted David on the cross in his darkest hour to identify. He used a song that David wrote in his most painful hour to identify his own pain in that season. I
Mm.
think I just think that's beautiful that Jesus, God hanging on a cross, quoted his great 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 grandfather, who was also in the darkest hour of his life, and he used
Mm.
that song. He used the song that David wrote in Psalm 22 to identify and give voice to the pain that he. So you have no idea, by speaking out your pain, by
Yep.
processing your pain out loud, you have no idea. Even me being open about my divorce has caused so many other people to come up to me and say, "This has felt like a taboo subject to talk
Mm.
about in the church. I haven't felt welcome to talk about it. I'm going through a crisis in my marriage. Will you pray for me?"
Mm.
Absolutely, I will pray for you because I've been there and I know exactly what you're feeling. And
Yep.
so there's you being open and vulnerable about your pain, processing it out loud with people actually will give voice to other people's pain and give them a song to sing in their darkest hour. And so I just think that's really beautiful in the scripture that
Absolutely.
Jesus quoted David on the cross. So
And two final thoughts for me. Um, Stephen Furtick, I'm not sure if he's still doing this, but when I heard him say this a couple of years ago, he said he announced to his congregation one Sunday morning in the midst of his message. It wasn't like a formal announcement, but he was preaching on something, and he said the statement. He said, "I am in weekly preventative counseling, meaning I meet with a counselor every week to just talk through stuff, talk through crap." And he's like, "And you're paying for it from the church budget. Like the church pays for me to keep that process going." And his church actually gave him a standing ovation in that moment. It worked with what he was saying in his sermon or whatever, and it was this emotional thing. And I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I took that. I was like, I massively respect that. I know tons of businessmen, like just this isn't a ministry thing, guys. Businessmen who pay, they might call it a mastermind, and there might be like a therapist who's there or like someone who's like speaking in or whatever. Like, but guys, business people, I feel like I'm just gonna say it, do a better job of keeping themselves sharp and accountable and in the flow of different streams of people than a lot of preachers and pastors and worship people do. Like there has to be that thing that we open up to say, I don't have this thing all together in my business or in my worship team or my church, whatever it is. And then last thing I'll end on is what the verse you said, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted.
yeah,
And so wherever you find yourself listening to this podcast, this episode today, just know that he is near and he is for you. He is not against you. The Lord resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And at the end of the day, it's my pride resisting wanting to go to therapy, wanting to talk to someone, wanting to talk to a trusted friend. It's my pride, but he gives grace to the humble. Matt, we talked about it last time. Just to end, the Throne Room Academy is launching soon. Just give us real quickly again. You said it the last episode, but where people can go to follow you. I just want to say I'm so excited, and we've talked about this for a lot of years. It's been in you and Kelly's heart to do this, and it's finally happening here really, really soon. Just give people a quick second on the Throne Room Academy, how they can follow you guys.
yeah, Jesus prayed, "Let it be on earth as it is in heaven." When we look at Revelation chapters 4 and 5, it gives us a heavenly description, what God looks like on his throne and what the response is of the angels and the elders and the seraphim that surround him. And so, Throne Room Academy, we're just going verse by verse, line by line through all of the attributes of God on his throne, looking at the response of the seraphim, the response of the 24 elders, the response of 10,000 times 10,000 angels, and just going, how can we implement this in our earthly reality here? And so, you can check it out. We have a Instagram handle, Throne Room Academy, at Throne Room Academy. You can also follow me at Matt Gilman Music, and you can also go to throneroomacademy.com and you can sign up there. And would just like to personally invite you guys to come and join the journey with.
Yes.
It'd be fun.
So it's like course teaching they watch on their own, and then like a community that they're a part of to discuss it.
The goal is
Awesome.
we're gonna have core curriculum teaching. We're gonna meet weekly. So whether that's, core curriculum teaching that will likely be pre-recorded, but then we're gonna have Q&A sessions. We're gonna have worship nights. We're gonna have guest teachers. We're gonna have. Um, it's still in development, so we're not sure exactly what that's all gonna land, but how that's all gonna land. But it's gonna be fun.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Thanks so much for being on, man. So appreciate it. Much love, and we'll see you
You guys.
soon. Thank you guys for listening. So appreciate your support of the show. Please like it, subscribe below wherever you're listening. Give us a comment down below, and please share this podcast. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.